I don't think there's been as fundamental shift in our lifetime beyond the birth of the internet. This is no fad. What gives me that belief, I think, is what I'm starting to see and what I'm starting to hear from people that have been far more invested in this space for far longer than I have. If you believe that this train is coming, as I do, then I'd rather be part of the change and be that voice of reason to support restaurant executives understand it than be on the outside witnessing it being done.
My guest today is Carl Orsbourn, best-selling author, operator, and one of the leading voices shaping the digital future of restaurants. Carl spent years as an executive at BP, helping refine and redefine the convenience retail space, before ultimately making the move to Ghost Kitchens and Delivery First Operations as the COO of Kitchens United. He's the co-author of Delivering the Digital Restaurant, a two-part series that's become essential reading to anyone trying to understand how food, technology, and logistics are converging to reshape the restaurant industry. In this conversation, we talk about what it means to build digitally mature restaurant, the mindset shifts, the operational rewiring, and the role AI plays in bridging the gap between data and action. We explore the hype cycles, the structural challenges, and the quiet discipline it takes to modernize an industry built for a different era. This is a conversation about technology, change, and what it means to build something that lasts, with someone helping operators do just that. As always, I'd like to give a special thanks to our sponsor, ClearCOGS. ClearCOGS is a leading provider of demand forecasting software in the restaurant industry, because ultimately the path to greater profits is always clear when you know what's ahead. And if you're enjoying this conversation, don't forget to give us a 5-star rating, hit that like and subscribe button. With that, I give you my conversation with Carl. Carl, fantastic having you here.
Great to be here. Nice to see you again, my friend. Usually I'm used to seeing you in person, so this is a little different.
It is a little different. I usually get the opposite. Usually I see everybody digitally and not personally. You, on the other hand, I can't go to a conference without running into you.
I make it a point to follow your movements. But
all right, so you got started pre-pandemic, right? And were you doing the interviews mid-pandemic as well?
Yeah, so the book writing process probably took a year. And so we were writing the book before we even heard about the pandemic. And then we were finishing things off in that first quarter of the kind of year. And when everything was locked down in the summer of that year, we just basically had the book launch. And we were really hard pressed to get the book out quickly because we knew this was something that actually was going to be of a big help to the industry. And we had I think it was Wiley, I can't remember which publisher it was now. They wanted to get the book out and they were going to give us the advance like you traditionally do, right? And that's great because you get all the big publishing house support. But they said it would take 2 years to get it out. And we're like, nope, this has got to happen now, folks. And so we ended up going through a hybrid publisher to get it out. And it worked out great because, the book became a real staple. Here it is above my head here. Became a real staple, I think, for a lot of folks to really see why this is something to treat seriously. And, here we are a number of years on later, and now it's a fundamental part of every restaurant operation. And the second book came out in 2023. And if the first book was, look, you've got to treat this seriously, this is why you've got to treat this seriously. The second book was more about, okay, the pandemic is in our rearview mirror. We should now recognize this is a marathon, not a sprint. You don't have to spray and pray against the wall to figure out what technologies work. You've got to figure out what your business outcomes are that you want for your business and purposely understand the capabilities and capacity you have to invest in that space. And if you do that, then you can actually build a journey towards digital maturity. And the second book is more of there's a little almost like homework at the end of each chapter to try and help the reader answer those questions to figure out where they are. And just to focus in on that particular stage versus trying to do it all at once.
How well did you know Meredith going into this?
Going into the book, very well. When I left, because my prior history is not so much in restaurants, but in convenience stores and retail, right? So I ran a 1,000-unit chain for a number of years And that in its own way, convenience retail is a little bit behind the times like restaurants. And I wanted to get into something a little bit more entrepreneurial, and a fellow friend of Meredith and ours introduced us to each other. And of course, she had left Yum Brands to go and help create Kitchen United. And so she introduced me to the team there, and I came in to help her scale up the operation of Kitchen United. And that's what we started working together, meeting a lot of these restaurant executives that were either shunning e-commerce and off-premise, or were just lukewarm on it and just saying, no, we'll just put it over there as an additional channel, but it's not really important to us. And so in many ways, the genesis of the book came out of trying to understand what it's going to take to help ghost kitchen capabilities impact the industry.
Yeah, so I asked because I think it was, so my brother literally had his girlfriend, long distance girlfriend, move in with him in San Francisco into their like 600 square foot apartment, like 2 weeks before the pandemic hit. And like, you get to know each other really, really well. So I can imagine like you go to write a book and all of a sudden the pandemic hits and you guys are like locked in there. Like that's a very intimate relationship.
Yeah, both Scott, Meredith's husband, and my wife, Alicia, they were very patient because we would be literally, like you say, locked in a room, or more often than not, because we're both here in Southern California, we're outside a coffee house overlooking the beach somewhere while we were both tapping away and just using that kind of connection to try and get through. And the approach was different as well, right? One of us would take the lead on one chapter, the other on the other, and then would swap. And then we'd do an edit and then we'd swap back. And then ultimately what we would do is we'd work with this really great editor called Sally Collins. And Sally would try and make sure that everything had one voice to it as we went to print.
Well, so I think it's a really interesting like snapshot in time, right? You went and got to go do all the research. Where are we as an industry right before the pandemic? Then you get to go into right after the pandemic, where have we landed? And, now you're on the AI side, where are we going? So like, I'd love to hear, just paint me a picture. Give me the snapshot. Where were we pre-pandemic?
When it comes to AI, or just generally when it comes to digitization?
Where were we as an industry, restaurant industry, in terms of technology? Where were the large gaps? What was on people's mind? What was the zeitgeist?
I think the main challenge was, quite honestly, is as you put yourself in the CFO seat of a big restaurant group, a lot of your thinking goes towards the percentage of sales that you're going to dedicate to different investment vehicles, right? So you're going to put a certain amount into growing your network, a certain amount towards marketing, and typically a certain amount towards technology. And for most of these folks that have been in the business for a number of years, number of decades maybe, that technology proportion was relatively small. And oftentimes, maybe every 5, 6, 7 years, it might be associated to a POS rehaul or something like that. And now,
was it small? Was it small because they didn't value it, or was it small because they didn't think the business needed it? Or I guess that's kind of saying the same thing. But yeah. was it we're a business that doesn't require the technology, or is it really just hey, we're counting pennies, and that's not the pennies we want to allocate towards it?
It's a really good question. I think if you were to ask many, they would. It wasn't really a question they would ask because it's just the way it always was, right? Yeah. And so
status quo.
Yeah, the status, and that's any transformative investment of technology today. In many ways, I'm sure you see this at ClearCOGS. It's not necessarily against the main competitor of ClearCOGS. It's against the status quo, right? And my world now in AI, it's the same thing, right? Because how many retailers, restaurants, you name them, how many of them actually have a dedicated budget, a certain percentage of sales, or whatever you want to call it, attributed to, no, we're going to invest in AI because we see that as the thing that's going to take us forward. And for many, and I think this is true when you look at what technology at a broad level has been positioned at, has been more of an enabler to the operation, right? It's been something that has helped business do things a little bit better. And then along comes the off-premise business, this new channel. There's a chance to build additional incremental revenue into your business that otherwise you wouldn't have had. And so with that in mind, the opportunity is more around, okay, hold on a second. Now you've got this thing that can affect the top line. And if I see that relationship, I'm far more likely to put money and investment behind it. And I think that's actually where, bring it all the way to today. A lot of people talk about AI as, oh, how can I save headcount here? Or how can I save money there? Or how can I do things more efficiently with a more productive kind of mindset? And all of that is absolutely true because it does bring that to the table and it's table stakes. But let me ask you this, Matt. You think over the last 30, 40 years, any big digital transformation across any industry, the things that have got the most investment, the things that have got the most traction are the things that affect top line. And so the sooner we get to a place which is either affecting top line or margin, gross profit as such, in a way that really can be seen and feel confident around, that's where we're going to start to see things really, I think, really get to a new level.
Yeah, but I think hindsight's 2020, right? It's almost going back to what was it, Henry Ford. If I asked people what they'd want, they'd say a faster horse, and they wanted the automobile, right? I think what you touched on, in your first book was really about, hey, you're viewing your business as a retail business, but you really can be an e-commerce business, and it's a different way to view the business itself. And I want to get to the AI, but I kind of want to get to how the businesses viewed themselves pre-pandemic. And then once they actually took in all of this technology and, kind of a digital first e-commerce approach, where that left them.
I think it was the customer. I mean, if you're listening to your customer well enough, you're realizing, and this kind of comes back, I've got my own podcast, right, called The Digital Restaurant. And the question I get all the time is, what is a digital restaurant? And my answer to them is, it's wherever your customers are. And how much of our day, Matt, do we spend walking past a restaurant and maybe being a bit hungry relative to how much of our day do we spend on our phone?
Yeah.
Right. And so the moment you start to realize that there's this chance of being able to be part of the consideration set on far more occasions when you're not even in the same geographic location as the restaurant itself, the moment you realize that you've got this opportunity to acquire new customers or retain and build brand loyalty with those customers that may still not even come and see you for another 2, 3, 4, 5 days, maybe weeks. But the fact that you're represented, that you know them, is creating this kind of mindset of, okay, now I can have a relationship with my restaurants. And, think about the best restaurant experience you've ever had. For me, and for most, I think it's typically at an independent restaurant. And why is that the case? Well, because typically you've got that relationship with the owner or the manager that's been there for a long time. And maybe they remember you, right? Maybe they remember the fact that I like this dish or my wife likes this particular glass of wine. Or maybe that's because you've got a really good server. Well, the digitization of our industry has created this ability now for that experience to happen every single time. And that, I think, is something to be really excited about. Now, we haven't got there yet. But when we start to think about everything from a data lens, and we start to realize that all of these things can now be captured in a way that perhaps weren't able to be captured before, and we start to think about our customers as an omni-channel opportunity, who might dine in one week and dine out the next and have pick up another time, we start to look at the ways in which we can create a relationship between our marketing investment and all those trips, and be able to then use that to be able to make better decisions for them going forwards. That's what digitization is bringing.
And that makes total sense. But I also heard, the idea that the customer drove it. The customer wanted that experience, right? So when you talk about AI and stepping into that part of the future, does the customer even know what they want? Can they drive it? Or is this technology new enough that everyone's just trying to figure out what that experience people want is going to be?
Yeah, it's a good question. Let's think about where we see it come to life more often than not. And that is on the front of each of our Amazon.com homepages. It's crazy how often Amazon knows what I want before I know I want it.
It's insane.
It's crazy how Instagram decides to put an advert in front of me. So we've just redone our dining room, got a nice new table. You have to come over, Matt. Nice new table, nice new set of chairs. And I was saying to my wife just this weekend, I want to get this really nice teal colored picture above the table here. And within 6 hours, Instagram's putting me all these different stock art, photography, custom framing type things in front of me. So it's scary in its own way. But it gives you that indication, the Amazon, the Instagram example of actually, yeah, this kind of stuff can happen. And actually, if it is what the kind of stuff that's front and most pressing to me, I'm okay with it. It kind of works. I think where people get a little concerned is where it's starting to be used in ways that sometimes people get a little bit more concerned about, where it hasn't been something that's relevant to me.
Well, double click on that. Let's go into kind of a thought experiment. What's that look like? The idea of, Instagram knows what I want, curates my experience. What's that look like for a restaurant?
What does it look like for a restaurant? Well, let's draw a parallel. Let's say you and I are eating some popcorn, having a beer or two, and watching the latest Italian cooking show on Netflix. All right? We're watching this great Italian cooking show. Well, what would it take for Olive Garden to appear on our Instagram the following in the hours that follow, or for there to be some kind of prompt on Instagram to tell us about some form of promotional offer at our local Italian? Right? So that, for me, is the kind of way in which we should think about this. How do we draw connections between things that we're engaging with and the food that we're eating?
Do you think that is happening already today, just behind the scenes?
I think it's probably happening. I suspect there are folks testing that kind of stuff. And there's definitely, obviously, more and more happening with regard to targeted streaming audience advertising, for sure.
Yeah, I sit there and think of... I think AWS does a good job of this. They're always launching a new feature, right? But it's not live. They just want you to sign up if you like it. And then all of a sudden, if enough people sign up, they'll go ahead and build it. I could imagine Olive Garden, maybe Olive Garden, maybe a different pasta place, having, kind of a shadow account that all of a sudden is showing advertisements for a bunch of different dishes that you may or may not want, just to see which ones you engage with to inform their menu design. Like that doesn't seem that futuristic or far-fetched.
You're right. And you mentioned menu design. You think about just the way in which people are engaging. Now, 10 years ago, before we had off-premise menus in the way that we do today, how much insight did someone responsible for being able to design a menu have on the way in which every single customer that came into their restaurant looked at their menus? They didn't. They had sales data, right? Just to know that, well, maybe the item in the top left-hand corner was selling more than the item in the bottom right corner. Right. And they would use that intel to perhaps shape the next menu. But now you can actually see how much time someone is exploring a particular item. Maybe they're looking for the ingredients list, or maybe they scroll through 3 or 4 different photos. Each of those are a data point. And, we're doing stuff right now at Invisible around things around beverage optimization rate. And the amount of restaurants that don't have a picture of the right type of bottle of Coke or Pepsi, or the way in which that particular item is described, right? That's basic merchandising. That's kind of, it's like not having the full representation of the item on the menu represented. It's kind of like, I don't know, you're calling it spaghetti, not spaghetti bolognese. It's like, well, if you just got a spaghetti, it's not going to sell as much, right?
I was talking to a friend of mine who's opening up their first restaurant. And, they've done restaurants in the past for other brands, but this is their first one. And he said, Matt, we use Sora for all of the photos of all of our food. And it's beautiful. Like, it's crazy how, and you can imagine how quickly they're going to start A/B testing different photos to see if it's going to change how somebody, buys based on better pictures. It's just crazy.
Yeah, it is. The flip side, of course, is that you've got to think about, can you deliver that image? Or are we creating the McDonald's challenge of that's not the quarter pounder that you got up there on the picture?
Well, I think he ordered today or opened today. So I think that's the least of his problems. Yeah, I think he's just waiting to see if they're a line or not at this point. Then he'll get to actually delivering on it. I was talking with Brandon from Byte. He was on last week. And, one of the things he was saying is it's amazing how much people are willing to give up their data to have a more personalized experience. They want it. They'd be happy to do so. But there seems to be this disconnect between, our industry's ability to get them to say yes and get their data and provide that, curated experience. Why? Where's the disconnect in the tech stack? Is it legal? Why can't we provide a curated experience? Because the technology seems like it's there.
Oh, big question. I think there's a broader theme around loyalty in that as well, right? How many loyalty apps do you have on your phone, Matt? You're in the industry, so you probably have a bunch, but
yeah. I only think like 6. There's not as many as you'd think.
But that even that is probably quite a large amount relative to the average person. And with Apple's, if you don't open up an app within 30 days, they delete it anyway. So there's a lot of things that get in the way of being able to have a loyalty profile. And in these very busy restaurants, the idea of creating an additional step, whether it be on the customer's end or whether it be on the organization's end, it's how do you drive convenience without creating extra levels of complexity? You talked about Brandon at Byte, right? And the whole idea of kiosks. Well, kiosk gives the customer the optionality. If they want the personal experience, there's still someone there to service them. If they want the time to peruse the menu and maybe type in their telephone number to be able to get a customized menu, you can go down that direction and have it. But it's about giving the customer that choice. Now, let me put my little crystal ball in front of us as we think about where that might take us. I think what's exciting about this is that I think within 5 years, we're all going to have AI agents, personalized AI agents, which are going to know the ins and outs of our nutritional profiles, the kind of restaurants that we frequent. And if we can choose to turn that on at the moment we want to turn that on, and then we build an infrastructure and a platform across our restaurant tech stacks that can then interpret that data, then we can create an experience that's truly one-to-one, and we can get closer to that Amazon home screen that we were talking about.
Yeah, so that was something Brandon and I were talking about. He was talking about a centralized database of all of this information on all of the different customers so that you could do that curated, experience. And, my point back was like, I'm not sure. I don't have my own agent. And, I share just the information you need. Almost, it's kind of what I'm hearing from you. It's a world of, these agentic agents representing ourselves in the digital world.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the last chapter of the first book, when I asked each of the 100 or so interviewees that we spoke to, what's this place going to look like by 2030? And how are we going to be feeling? And, I don't think anyone necessarily went as far as I did in my projection, but the reality of being able to take all these different data threads of intel, from the stuff on my watch, from my doctor's recommendations to what I ate over the last kind of 7 days, through to how much I've been exercising, all the buying habits that I have, the kind of stuff that actually exists out there in different ways. If we can tie these different loops of data together, then ultimately there's no reason why we couldn't assume an agent could create a profile for us that ultimately is going to make a better decision than we ourselves could make for ourselves.
Okay, well, then let me ask you about free will, because I think that's kind of where it goes. If I can influence all of your buying decisions based on what I show you, right, and influence your purchasing patterns, at that point, I'm not necessarily making a decision so much as I've been kind of conditioned to make the decision. Does it eventually just become this homogenous world of like, the AIs are telling us what to buy and that's what we do? Or, do you get enough signal in the data as far as what you should be doing, what the customer really wants at their core?
Another great question. I think for me, it depends on how capitalist we become. Right, in the sense that
I think we're pretty capitalist right now. So are you thinking we're going to become even more capitalist?
Oh, I mean, if you think that now if the AI agent can be somewhat influenced by a certain restaurant group that wants to be able to target someone like myself with my demographic that typically eats this and eats that and typically has takeout on a Friday or something with the wife, if they want to be able to say to the organization that ultimately has enabled us each to have our own AI agents, to be able to say, well, this, just so you're aware, we check 9 out of the 10 boxes that fit Carl Orsbourn's profile. And I'm willing to pay a little bit of money so that I can be part of that consideration set. Then, yeah, you're right. We are giving up some free will. So it's almost the shift of what's happening. And I did something on my own podcast recently about answer engine optimization and how that's taken over SEO, right? The fact that when you look at the fact that 55% of all Google searches now are an AI overview, but something like 70%, I'll correct my number, but something like 70%.
No, I actually want to know about this because I've been sitting here on the back end thinking like, there's a playbook for managing SEO. How in the heck do you deal with these large language models doing search?
Yeah.
How do you get found?
Well, from what I read, from the bit of the research that I did on it, it means you're going to have to write your website a little differently, in the sense that you're going to have almost like a Q&A section on it. And you're going to have to be able to explain more about your vegan Thai dish and the items that go into making that particular vegan Thai dish. So that way, if someone is typing in that they want to have a coconut milk curry from a Thai restaurant that only predominantly does vegan food, the AI engine is going to be able to identify that versus being able to just pick it up from the name of a product on a menu somewhere. The idea there is that the way in which we think about how to be discovered is going to change radically over the course of the next few years.
I can't help but think that, the Amazons of the world know us so well. The Instagrams know us so well, but they're all using kind of descriptive analytics of what we've done, our behavior on a website, but they don't really know our true intention, right? How often do we click on the wrong social media post and then are just fed a bunch of that, right afterwards? But, when you go and search something, I know exactly what it is that you're looking for. So a long way of saying being able to answer somebody's question is, important. Knowing what questions people are asking, like that's gold. Whoever is getting the questions, that is going to be who gets, power in the future.
Right. No, absolutely. Which is, of course, exactly why Google became Google, because you knew what people were searching for.
Yeah. Well, today, it doesn't feel like anybody's chatbot even works. Like you go to, OpenAI and, I started playing with ChatGPT. It's like, this is amazing. And then you go to anybody's website that has a AI powered agent and you ask it a question and it gives you a link to the wrong help section. Wait, what is that about? What is the disconnect there?
Oh man, you're bringing up some PTSD of a recent flight home and me trying to interact with an airline's chatbot. And
it's the worst.
Oh my goodness, it's a really good question, and I often ask a lot of people in my line of work now, just how good's your chatbot? How do you know that your chatbot is given the experience that you expect your chatbot to give?
That is a good question. I assume it's anecdotal. My wife got on it and she's really pissed off.
Yeah, no one in a position of influence can answer that question really well. And so that's a good way of being able to get into the questions around how can you feel confident about the AI models in your business, right? Because if you were to condition your thinking just for a moment of an example of that being a chatbot, which of course has an artificial intelligence aspect to it, how do you make sure that it's not just giving your customers the answers to their questions, but also the experience, the brand voice, the ability to understand when should this go correctly to a human versus when it shouldn't, and do it in such a way that you can really benchmark it against those others out there that are perhaps competitors to you or ones that are doing it better. And if you do that right and you work with the right type of organization that can help you identify those challenges, then you're onto a place which is going to start enabling you to feel more confident about AI in that particular context, but hopefully then in many others as well.
Well, shameless plug. I think that's what you guys are doing at Invisible, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we have a contact center division, but we've been helping 80% of the large language models with this very thing, right? So as you frame it up, as you think about the kind of chat interface that you have with whether it be a ChatGPT or a Gemini or whatever, the reality is that those models had to be trained and they've had to be refined and they've had to be checked to make sure they're not going into bad directions, which of course in the early days, they had some challenges around. But that's how my company's been really helping us think about building models that can really help not just the folks that are giving us the technology, but also the enterprises that are starting to build this type of capability into their own framework.
Well, and I want to get into the enterprises because you guys work with the OpenAIs and Googles, correct?
Well, we work with 80% of the large language models out there. And so, for us, the main place that we try to position ourselves is, yes, those technology partners have been very much part of a big part of our history. But now, as you say, we're focusing on the enterprise side as well. And the enterprise side is any organization that is wanting to explore how AI can help transform their business. But here's the challenging piece that I run up against in that particular story, Matt, and that is, you and I have been part of it for a long time, is that many people, especially in the consumer-orientated verticals like restaurants or retail, they have a problem, and then they go and seek a provider that perhaps can help them solve that problem. And that, of course, has created the SaaSification of our industry, which has opened up capabilities for many, and that's been great. But what's happened over the last 10, 15 years is we've created these convoluted tech stacks that have had different bits and pieces built on top of them. I was at Food on Demand a few months back, and I brought up this AI-generated image of an ugly Lego brick building with all these different colors and shapes. And I said, ladies and gentlemen, this is your tech stack today. It kind of looks like a tech stack, and it's really kind of.
Was it assembled, or were all the pieces just scattered on the floor?
Smooth, right? I mean, if you and I want to go and build a spaceship, we're going to go to the Lego store and buy a Lego spaceship model. And I think what's happened is we're now getting into the world where everyone and their mother is selling an AI feature or solution on top of their current practice. And, quite frankly, a lot of it's BS. And if there's one thing we don't need in this industry right now, it's creating further distrust of technologists and what we're offering. And it's obviously the thing it's the reason I do what I do with the books and the podcast, is to try and help draw some level of transparency around this. But here's the thing. If we continue to build these convoluted tech stacks, which of course come with binary APIs between maybe the point of sale and the particular point solution, we're going to miss the bigger picture here. And the bigger picture is thinking about this almost as bigger opportunity as it was when e-commerce was born, in the sense of understanding the infrastructure, the business model changes that perhaps could be opened up by looking at the framework of how technology runs in your business. So with that, having a platform mentality, being able to say, okay, where are the data silos in my business? Because I don't think that you'd meet any restaurant group out there that's going to tell you we don't have data. They've got tons of data. They're drowning in an ocean of data. The problem is the data is all over the place, and they haven't got the time or the wherewithal to necessarily try and connect those things together because they've got tons of these binary APIs that are connecting things. And I think it was the last chapter of the second book, I talk about the scenario of this holistic interdependent system, whereby imagine you have two line cooks call out tonight. Well, what happens today? When that happens, we rely on the hustle of the GM to make decisions in the moment based on the intel that they've got in front of them. And the best GMs get through it, and they get through service and everything's good. But the average GM or the poorer performing GM struggle. And as a result of that, the customer struggles with a poorer experience. Maybe deliveries are a little longer, or maybe service takes out a little longer, or maybe the dish isn't presented as well. All right, so that's the problem. So what are we going to do about it? Well, if we could have a framework, a platform approach to be able to understand that we've got two line cooks calling out tonight, and now we can actually not only engage with the HR system, but also with the scheduling system that can immediately send out text messages to 3 or 4 different folks that perhaps are available, that we're not going to engage extra overtime tonight. Or maybe it could also engage with OpenTable, which actually is going to reduce the capacity of available tables for reservations tonight down to 70%, just to be able to constrain some of the supply that potentially would otherwise be covered. Or maybe it goes to DoorDash and actually increase the prices on DoorDash by 10% across the menu items again, to have that kind of approach of being able to quench that particular channel's worth of demand. So that way, the operational throughput of what that team and that kitchen can do tonight, assuming you haven't been able to get anyone else in place, you've now got this holistic interdependent system that is making decisions so that the GM can look at option 1, 2, and 3 and go, yeah, option 2, done, in a click, within seconds, a far more informed decision that no human's ever going to be able to make on their own. That's the kind of future that I'm excited about. That's the one I think we can build towards.
But that all sounds nice, but like, where do the SaaS, that fragmented SaaS, tech stack, how does that evolve into it? Is it that, hey, all these SaaS companies should just get rid of their agentic thing and, interface with the corporate system? Is it that we can replace all those SaaS products with, an AI system? Like, how does it unfold?
Yeah, good question. For me, I think it depends on how effective the SaaS solution truly is. Because certainly from what we try to do, we want to work alongside the current technologies that are in place that are doing a great job for the organization, but then similarly work alongside the workflows that are working within the organization. The point here is more about, you've got to take a step back and say, what do I want the best experience to be? What do I want the most effective process flow to look like? And that therefore might mean that for some SaaS solutions, it's better for me to be able to say, actually, I've had to manipulate my business so many ways around making this SaaS solution work, that actually if I could turn that off and create my own workflow, which yes, has some agentic elements, maybe has some human in the loop elements with regards to experts that support that process, whether they be in-house or out-of-house, and those workflows being engineered in such a way to be able to deliver the same outcome, if not better than what the SaaS solution was. That's one part of it. But then the other part of it is where there is a current SaaS solution that is working, that is creating a great experience for the operator, then how do you make sure that the data threads that are coming from that particular SaaS platform go into a data platform that don't just sit in their own individual silo, that are now utilized across the entirety of the business? And you think of your world from an inventory management standpoint. If I could channel inventory forecasting to wider forecasting capabilities that can actually speed up the opportunity. I mean, let me think of, as I think aloud with you, imagine if I could speed up the approach from understanding the typical inventory forecast capabilities of my current network, and now I've got a new store opening in a completely new part of the world that actually is going to help me be able to get that location up and running a week faster than usual because I've got this capability built in. It's not necessarily got anything to do with the SaaS solution itself, but it's going to help with being able to speed up the deployment of growth for that organization just by tying together those data silos. Does that make sense?
It does. But I sit here and I think we as an industry are so bad at adopting technology. And this technology is growing so quickly that is it better to just let the dust settle and pick it up in 24 months when somebody else has figured this out? Or is there like a huge, almost e-commerce pandemic first mover advantage to doing it today?
Yeah, I think that's the perennial question, right? As to where do you fit across the innovator's dilemma, and are you going to be one of those folks that really want to deploy capital into a space that may well feel like high risk? I mean, I tell each of the prospects I speak to that, I think it was Gartner, that 85% of all AI initiatives last year failed. They never made it to scale. Right? So
I think the real question is, did the 15% that work really, really move the needle?
Right. And are there clear metrics that help people understand what the business outcome shifts have become as a result of deploying it? So look, there is definitely a question mark about, is this the right time? I think the status quo is always the biggest competitor to any AI initiative out there. The other question, though, I'd put to you is, what's the risk of not acting? Right? Is this the chance for your organization to be able to differentiate itself in a way that no one else will? And if you can get to a point where you're moving faster in this direction, then maybe you can create a better experience for everyone involved in your organization. And, we were talking about forecasting earlier and the role of the GM. Well, we still have a terrible problem in this industry when it comes to how long we keep people in our business, right? The turnover rates is shocking.
It's crazy.
And yet, if you were to look at the snapshot of the best restaurants with the best levels of churn in their restaurants, they're typically the general managers that don't spend a huge amount of time in their office, that spend a lot of time with their team, helping articulate the best standards and the consistencies of them, and time in front of their guests to hear what they're saying, what they're liking, what they're not. Well, if technology and AI can help us create smarter, more decision-informed GMs that keep them out of the office and therefore do the types of things that no tech can, which is engaging with the people that are engaging in our restaurants, then we can create a better restaurant experience for everyone. So that's the choice I think executives have out there, is actually, are you serious about trying to create a better experience for your guests and your team members? Because if you can do that, and you can do it in a way that's purposeful over a period of time, then maybe we've got something to get excited about.
Well, I think there's a missing variable in the equation because I don't think anybody disagrees with what you just said. In fact, I'm sitting here smiling because I think I've said that on so many sales calls that it's like, oh my gosh, I'm looking in the mirror. I guess it's a good talking point because, Carl's saying it does sound much better with your accent, by the way. But I think the missing variable in the equation is simply this. How hard is it to actually do? Because, it's kind of crazy. You look at an OpenAI that has to answer everything, right? And it does an incredible job. I actually think if I asked, HubSpot support on OpenAI, it would do a much better job than asking the HubSpot support on HubSpot that's supposedly using agentic AI on its own data. So what is the conundrum that let's call it the all-in-one answer bot seems to do a better job than these, enterprise built solutions? Why is there a gap there? It doesn't make sense to me.
First of all, how do you know it does a better job? Right, going back to that piece, right? If you were to put mathematical equations into ChatGPT, it's not the best mathematician. So check your numbers. Don't do your accounts just as yet. So you've got to train the models sometimes in a small language model approach, right? To actually say, no, I really want you to be an expert in this kind of area, and I need you to focus on this kind of data set. And some folks go down the world of actually creating something called RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. It's some of the industry is moving away from that now, but how do you operate off a data set that is private to you and your own organization, and then build that interface from a language perspective on top of it?
You've said this a couple of times. How do you know what good is? Is there a way to score good mathematically? What does a good chatbot look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, the benchmarking work that we do all the time is very much around trying to understand what good looks like relative to alternatives. But then more importantly, where you're not getting good, how do you find the very specific area that you need to be able to change and improve to be able to get a better result? That, I think, is our sweet spot where we really have a far more efficient way of being able to do it. Because otherwise, I mean, for, the big, large language models, it's like a needle in a haystack, right? How do you know exactly where to fix this particular element? But that's where working with enterprises as well, it's really important to be able to help them get that level of confidence that their model is doing the right thing. And a lot of times it's about just doing a lot of different tests. I mean, we've got 15,000 experts out there that are engaging with models on every single hour, making sure that we are giving a great experience for our customers, but ultimately so that their own clients are getting a better experience too.
Yeah, I would say you said benchmarks, baselines. Are those baselines getting better every quarter or every year, or are they pretty stagnant right now?
I mean, it depends, but I think in general, yes, they are getting better. The models are getting smarter. They're getting far more reaching in terms of their capability sets. It's pretty exciting to see what's available. I don't know whether you've seen the agent capability that's just come out in the last few weeks, but the fact that you can now set something off and it can go and buy your flights to Tahiti or whatever. It's like, wow, this is kind of crazy how this is going. But again,
just give the AI your credit card. It'll all work out well. Don't worry about it.
Well, to be fair, there's plenty of warnings out there saying just be careful with this, right? Because I think Sam Altman said the risk of fraud is going to potentially go through the roof pretty soon.
Oh yeah, I've already told my wife we have a special passcode. Like if I call you and ask you for something, like verify it, because I've said way too many things that are public. You'd be able to clone my voice pretty easily today.
Wow, that's a good point. Yeah, well, good to know. Maybe I should try that, Matt. I'll use this recording.
I don't think my wife's wiring me money anytime soon, so I don't think I have too much to worry about. But going back to it, is there a world with which the larger models that are getting all the questions? Because right now I'm asking my tech support about HubSpot on OpenAI, not, HubSpot. Is there a world where they ultimately dominate, that the agnostic all-in-one LLMs rule the world? Or do you see it being more small models that are being deployed on enterprise level or, within my own organization?
I think the latter. In the same way as Google a few years back, they could have been the restaurant ordering platform if they wanted to, right? Because they had data on search, and therefore, if they really wanted to, they could have been far bigger than DoorDash and Uber Eats with that whole channel if they chose to go in that direction. But they didn't because they remembered what their core of their business was. And so I think we'll find something similar with the large language models. And the other piece of this, of course, that the large language models don't get is the data about your customers, right? So they don't get the intel attributed to the specific processes within your organization. They don't understand the workflows within your existing organization. So the trick of this is, how do you utilize these models in such a way to interact with your data to be able to help you and your organization do things differently? And I think one of the things that comes up a lot in all of these conversations around AI today is that many people are looking at them as a productivity opportunity, right? How can I do more with less? I was at a dinner recently with a bunch of CTOs and top engineers, and all of them were getting super excited and giddy about, I don't need a software developer to do this now, and what would have taken me 3 months, I can do in 3 days. And it was all people getting excited about capability, and I get it. But productivity is table stakes right now. I mean, that's just this kind of stuff that everyone should be thinking about. But it's less about...
You had a post up on LinkedIn like last week about, where this is all going, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. I'm always putting stuff
on productivity and who's going to affect.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and it was about, they did a survey of a bunch of enterprise leaders attributed to which jobs are going to be eradicated most from generative AI and automation capabilities over the next 5 years. And I think it was postal workers and bank clerks that were top of the list, right? There wasn't any restaurant workers, by the way, so no one fear. But I think generally the idea of people framing AI as a headcount killer, that kind of thing is one of the big fears out there. And look, there is an element of jobs changing for sure. I was at a conference stage recently and I said, 30, 40 years ago, how many restaurants had dishwashers in place? Right. And the reality is that before dishwashers existed, there was a dishwasher person helping with washing dishes. And yet, when you look at the headcount, it's probably very similar today to what it was back then as well. So jobs change for sure. You think about the way in which the food distribution companies are going to start adopting autonomous vehicles, right? There might not be a driver delivering produce to your restaurants in a few years' time. Well, guess what? You're going to have someone take something off the van, right, to be able to put it into the freezer. So you've got those kind of shifts that are going to happen when it comes to jobs being removed, new jobs emerging. But I actually like to frame people with the thinking of, rather than thinking about how you can use AI with 5 less people, what would you do if you had 100 more in your team? Because when you flip it from saving headcount or moving money and making things more efficient to what could you do if you could actually do it to this degree? And I've been speaking to some restaurant chains about things like what would you do to improve your advertising efficacy, right? So maybe today you're doing 5 A/B tests on different promotional campaigns. And I asked them, well, what would you do if you could do 20? And they told me, that would be amazing. I was like, all right, well, that's the way to start thinking about AI. If you can now quadruple your advertising testing capabilities so that your marketing efficiency can be so much better, that's something to think about, right? And so that same conversation can happen across every single department, across every business right now. And that's the type of conversation that I like to have.
All right. So you're in the business of the training of these models and deploying them in enterprise, settings. One of the things that I hear a lot about, my co-founder is always telling me this, is, the improvement in the base technology, these transformer models, right? It's starting to stagnate, right? We had this exponential growth, and now we're spending a lot of money and we're making them marginally better. All the improvement today seems to be coming on the software layer, the agentic layer. How do you take this technology and, deploy it into your day-to-day? Is that what you're seeing, or are we still getting better with the base technology?
Maybe both. I think the base technology is definitely getting better. I think when it comes to software and where I'm seeing it come to life, I think a lot of it is kind of fireworks and glitz. And the question mark for me again comes back to, does it really work? And actually, is it going to play nice with others? Right? Those are the 2 questions. And it's it's all too easy to get drawn in on features that look very cool on a flyer or on a conference exhibition stage somewhere. But the reality is that you've got to feel confident that there's a journey to being able to prove that it does affect the bottom line in some way. A lot of what I try to do is build pricing terms around sharing in the upside, right? So if we move the needle by 1% here, then can we share in that upside together? Because that kind of creates that spirit of partnership, which I don't think you typically see out there as often as I'd like to see. And so I think there's that shift, I think, in business model of rather than think about a dollar per site per month, how can I actually think about a platform fee and then some kind of upside arrangement? And that is the difference, I think, between the SaaS model out there and these new emerging models.
I think part of that is restaurants are really bad at quantifying things. I mean, whether it's food cost or labor, outside of rent, I think everything is a little bit wishy-washy on what really was the improvement. Did food costs just go down? Was Billy on vacation last week and now they're back and they're running a tighter ship? And I think it kind of goes to this point of you guys work in lots of different industries. I imagine e-commerce is pretty straightforward. Your new agentic ad manager drove a whole lot more business. How do restaurants, convenience stores, retail play a little bit differently with these models? You guys are seeing lots of different industries. Are restaurants that unique, or are they just another industry that may be, a little bit more averse to tech and that's why they get things last?
Oh man, big question. I think the main reason why restaurants struggle is because of the challenge that they have against the running, the day-to-day operation of their business, right? So, a lot of folks I speak to will say, I love what you're doing. It sounds fantastic, but I just want my POS to do this right now, right? I need to put all my attention on them being able to make sure that the business can run. So I think that is usually the type of thing that is causing the challenge. And so it's the system that they've gone into that creates the lethargic approach, if you will, to being able to try new things, which, by the way, gives the opportunity for the emerging players, the ones that perhaps are 80, 100 units, to really start to make a name for themselves because they shouldn't be weighed down by such things. And that's, of course, what we see with why innovation and new kind of brands come through, because they've been able to nail that.
It goes back to my buddy using Sora for his pictures. If you went and told McDonald's, we're going to generate, some, AI photos, to be like, have you thought about all the repercussions that we could have? Maybe the lettuce is too green and we're going to get sued for that. Whereas, the young guy, it's like, why not give it a try? It saved me some money and the pictures are prettier. They're going to figure that out first.
Yeah, no, exactly right. It's, but then you talk about the value of a brand, right? So you take a brand like McDonald's, maybe it's not so much about using the Sora, but it's more about how do I ensure that my brand standards are being upheld across the board, right? How can I start to utilize computer vision, right, to be able to understand the deviations that are happening in a process, whether it be in the back of house, or maybe it's something around in a casual dining concept, right, where you've got computer vision not picking up on faces and identity challenges, but more about how many times has the table been touched, right? And therefore, is that something that turns into a training opportunity? You've got the ways in which a lot of that intel can therefore change the operating system and therefore come back into the overall labor forecasting of what's required for that location or the training setup for that location. So that way individuals are getting more curated training programs to help them in the areas where perhaps they're struggling, because those types of things have otherwise been observed by a computer as opposed to a human.
I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that. Outside of, I'm not sure the franchisees are going to want spy cameras that are quantifying everything. I think that might open the door to too many, let's call it opportunities to train people on improvement. Might be like drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah, but maybe that's the opportunity for the emerging franchises, right? I don't think you're right. The change of being able to do it for the big established guys might be different. My mum lives in a care home over in England, and I went to visit her a month or two back, and we went to look at an alternative home, and they had a camera up in the ceiling. And they're putting this test in place, not to identify what that person's doing, but to understand if they fall outside of their bed in the evenings, they know that someone can get to them. Now, tell me why that doesn't make sense, right? That completely.
The moment you said computer vision and, advanced care living, it was like, oh my gosh, falls. That'd be amazing. Taking your medication would also be a great one. Like, those are straightforward use cases.
Yeah. But even back when I was running Kitchen United, Matt, on the ops side, I was in that place of being able to utilize security cameras, because my remit there was to build an operation that wasn't going to have the typical amount of management layer, I guess, for want of a better phrase, that you'd typically have in a multi-unit business. So I had to rely on technology. So we had cameras in the back of house everywhere. And, there would be things like floors not being mopped at the frequency we'd be after, and would be able to tell the GM about that. So that way they'd be able to have the conversations with the people appropriately. And so there's an element of Big Brother attributed to all of this. But on the same end.
So you're obviously a believer in all of this AI stuff, right? Like, Kitchens United, storied career. Why did you choose to go to an AI company? Like, what makes you so optimistic about the future of AI?
I don't think there's been a fundamental shift in our lifetime beyond the birth of the internet as this. There's nothing as big as what this is. Many of us still don't truly get our heads around the far-reaching impact that this has had. I mean, this is no fad. This is not the metaverse, right? This.
But elaborate on that, because I hear people say that all the time, right? But like, you're putting your money where your mouth is. Like, what gives you that belief?
What gives me that belief, I think, is just because of what I'm starting to see and what I'm starting to hear from people that have been far more invested in this space for far longer than I have, and their vision, I guess, their vision of where they see this to go, and the fact that the technology continues to move forward at such a rate, at such a pace, that in many ways you get a little scared of it as well, right? You go, wow, is this thing going to come off the track?
You got a password with your wife.
Right. But on the same end, if you can create a world, which, I gave you that restaurant example earlier, right? Where if restaurant managers can spend more time with their teams and more time with their customers, why wouldn't we want that? Isn't that something we all want to go towards? And now you take that same concept and apply it into all walks of life. Then the question is, it needs the appropriate curation. It requires the appropriate care to be able to deliver this in a way that is appropriate. And so if you believe that this train is coming, as I do, then I'd rather be part of the change. I'd rather be part of the voice as we learn more, as we get more definitive in our understanding around how it's going to impact our industry, and be that voice of reason to support restaurant executives understand it, than be on the outside witnessing it being done. And so for me, given the fact that I've written the books and I talk about stuff on this space quite a bit, I feel in many ways I'm in that unique position to be able to do that and to hopefully help in whichever way I can.
When's book 3 come out?
The perennial question. Well, first of all, Meredith said doesn't want to go anywhere near it. I suspect her world in Starbucks will preclude her as well. But I don't know. I think there probably will be a third book at some point, and it probably will be very much centered around the kind of stuff we've been talking about today. But the reality is that 90% of restaurants still need to focus on books 1 and 2.
I hear you on that. Well, for the ones that aren't in the 90%, that last 10%, just give me kind of the quick rundown of how do you bring AI into an organization? If an enterprise shows up tomorrow and says, we want to be AI first, we're an emerging brand, we want to, push the envelope, but we have no idea how. What's that even look like?
Great question. The starting point actually has very little to do with AI. In terms of the actual output for them, the starting point comes down to the data. When bad data meets good AI in a fight, the data wins every single time.
Okay.
So the starting point.
So What data? What data? Because like I know everyone says the data, but if I'm a restaurant and I want to prepare for the next couple of years, what data should I be focusing on?
Well, let's say you were a restaurant prospect of mine right now, and I was talking to you about how I'd be approaching it. I'd be wanting to understand, well, what are your biggest problems right now, Matt? Right? What are the challenges that you really want to be able to address in your business that are most critical for you being able to achieve your in-year goals or your short-term goals? And that, I think, then determines the way in which we reverse engineer that, right? So let's say you want to improve your labor to sales ratio from whatever it is to a lower amount. And I say, okay, well, then let's talk about what reducing that by 1% might look like for you, right? If we can get to a place that this looks like that type of commercial opportunity, is that the direction you want to go in? So you start by talking about the outcomes, the commercial deliverable that you really want to be able to drive towards. And then you start.
So there's not this unifying, like these are the 3 best practices that you should be collecting, refining and making sure it's good. It's really more, what is the business objective you're after? And let's start by making sure that data is correct.
You've got to start with the clear understanding of the outcome. Once you've done that, you've got to get into clear scoping to truly understand what the current landscape looks like. How messy is the current data? How convoluted are the current technology workflows that exist? So that needs to be mapped out. And then probably what I'd do for you is I would create a demo source to be able to say, what does this look like, Matt? If we were able to put this workflow in front of you that we believe could actually generate that type of improvement, then would that help your business move in the right direction? And if I get the affirmative there, then that's when we start to bring for our side a forward deployed engineering team in to basically shape that solution. And the point of all of that is to say, you start with one thing. When you're trying to eat an elephant, you've got to start with something. But the best thing to start on is the thing that's most important, the business focus that's going to make a difference. And for me, as I said at the top, it's better for me to focus on revenue generation or margin improvements than it is on just cost efficiencies.
It's interesting listening to people in the technology world, almost shifting the attitude from this is what the technology can do for you. Would you like to use it? To, okay, what are you trying to solve? And we will help get the technology to solve that. I mean, it's kind of a small distinction, but a huge change.
Totally. That's right. And there's this idea, I mean, half the reason I think we call ourselves invisible is because we want to be like the best technology, which is invisible in the background, right? That works around you and your business, as opposed to you having to adjust your business around the tech. Now, all of these tech projects, you ask anyone, I mean, it's such an encumbrance upon time and the resource drain onto an already strained tech team or ops team is really complicated. So whatever technology is being brought into a restaurant these days, as much as the features might draw people's attention and excitement, the effect it's going to have on the business and the way it's going to run also has to be really, really evaluated hard. And so the lighter touch you can make the change, the more likely you are to be able to have an impact.
Yeah, I had Stuart McGuigan. He was the CIO of the U.S. Department of State and Johnson & Johnson. And, one of his big advice is like, if you guys want to go around the go-kart track quicker, you're riding a lawnmower, the answer is not to put a jet engine on the lawnmower. Like, that's not going to end well. Like, you got to take it, you got to eat the elephant bite by bite. Well, look, last question, and I will let you get out of here. I'm just curious, you've pontificated on the future in your books. Pontificate on how this rolls out in the restaurants, not even just the restaurant industry. How is this going to roll out in enterprises over the next 2, 5, 10 years? What's the future look like?
I think what it looks like, first of all, is us finally getting serious about sorting that data out, right? So if we can imagine a world where we have less data silos and we have a better ontology of our data that allows us to clean, to be able to derive better insights, and to ultimately make better decisions in our enterprises, then that's going to result in better customer experiences. The reality is, as we know, not everyone's going to move at the same pace as everyone else. And so there's an opportunity, I think, for those that do choose to take those first steps into it to be able to get ahead. There will be some missteps, there will be some failures, and I think it's about being able to find appropriate strategic partners to be able to go in a direction and learn together, but do it in such a way that actually has those outcomes in mind. When I think of the type of journey we're going to go on, I think we've got to bring it back to the guest, right? What would it take for our restaurant guests to have a better experience in our restaurants? And if we ask ourselves that question, then it shouldn't mean a huge amount of difference to what the best experiences are today. And we know what a great restaurant experience is. So then we've got to ask ourselves, how can we have those more often? And how can we create an environment where those happen more frequently and become the norm as opposed to the exception?
Yeah, we know what good is in our brand. We know what a great guest experience is. How can we use technology to replicate that with more people?
Yeah.
Carl, I appreciate you coming on. If people want to get in touch with you, they want to follow you, they want to read your book, how can they find you?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on first, Matt. I always appreciate spending time with you, and great questions today. In terms of reaching out to me, LinkedIn is a great place. Take a look at my rather weird surname of Orsbourn. If you're looking for the Osbourns out there, there are plenty, not many Orsbourns. The book is on Amazon, on Audible, if you want me to read it to you. You can go to Amazon to find that. But the digital.restaurant is a place to learn more about the book and the podcast that I've got, which is the Digital Restaurant, where we talk about 5 latest headlines affecting the worlds of technology and off-premise. And so hopefully if I get my way, I'll get Mr. Wampler on joining me on one of those shows too as well, so we can talk more about what's happening in this space. But feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and look forward to having more good conversations about this, because we're all learning. And I think that's the thing. I think, Matt, you and I share all the time, right? We don't pretend that we have all the answers, but as long as we have curious minds, we're having the right conversations.
Amen to that. And while you may be working for Invisible, you are far from invisible from a digital standpoint. You can find you just about anywhere.
Thank you.
Well, Carl, thanks again, man. It's great having you on.
Likewise.